What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. In today's episode, I'm going to let you in on a little garden secret. I'm going to share with you one of my all-time, and I mean all-time, favorite things to do with herbs from the garden at the end of the season. So we are here with this absolutely huge sage plant. This sage plant's almost 4 years old and it is giant. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger every year. And every time I clip it back, it seems like it only encourages it to get even bigger. But wouldn't you love to have a beautiful bouquet of sage like that? That is just, oh my gosh, incredible. But when we clip all this back, now we can hang dry some, just like that. But one of my favorite ways to preserve the flavor and to use it in the kitchen is to actually make a clarified butter infused with herbs. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take all these as well as some other herbs into the kitchen. Now, hold on, wait. I know you're probably saying, well, Luke, I don't consume dairy. I don't have butter in my kitchen. You can do this with things like olive oil, any type of vegetable oil. You can infuse those as well. So stay tuned. You're gonna love this. I guarantee it. All right, so we just got back from the garden and check it out. This is our sage bundle. It is, oh, it's incredible. It smells incredible. It looks incredible. Now we're not gonna use all of this for this recipe. We're only gonna use a pretty small portion. I'd say like maybe, I don't know, this much or so, maybe a tad bit more than that, maybe like this much or so. A good little bundle of sage. The rest we're gonna hang dry for later use. Then we also have here our butter. Now we have lots of butter. You don't necessarily need this much butter. If you could do this with just one stick of butter. We're doing a ton because we're doing 2 different batches and because we have lots of parties, we do lots of cooking, we go through a decent amount of butter. So this is gonna last us a long time though. But we have here our butter. Now, we also have 2 other things. We got garlic right from the garden, beautiful, super fresh, smells insane. And then we also have some rosemary. Rosemary is one of my more favorite herbs to use. It's so versatile in the kitchen. It's really mild, but it has a wonderful seasonal kind of fall pine smell. It just smells incredible with anything. I mean, you could baste it over chicken, over turkey. You could just put it on some bread. It's amazing. And so we got that. And the final thing you're gonna need is just, if you really want to, you can use some salt, sea salt. I am going with a combination of salted butter and unsalted butter to kind of just eliminate that hassle. So you can add some sea salt if you want, salt to taste. I prefer just to have my butter salted. So I'm using a 1-to-1 ratio of salted and unsalted butter. All right, first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna turn the stove on with a dry pan. You want no moisture. So all the herbs we got here are dry. Now, if you want to wash them, you can wash them. I'm very confident these are nice and clean, but if you want to wash them, make sure you at least air dry them for a couple hours so there's no moisture. Because again, butter is going to be basically pure fat. And so all that fat, you don't want it to pop, you don't want it to splatter. And so dry pan on low heat. You want very, very low heat to clarify your butter. We're gonna take half of our butter. We're gonna throw that in the pan. All right, so we're just gonna let this sit here and melt. And what you'll notice is over time, the milk solids will actually rise to the top. And what you're looking for is just the butter fat. The butter fat is gonna be that really rich yellow, otherwise known as ghee. And it is a very super rich, creamy yellow color, but it's also clear. You'll notice a lot of the stuff that's starting to rise to the top here is kind of foamy and white. That's the milk solids, and that is not what we want. It actually reduces the heat point of the butter. So if you're cooking at higher heats, clarified butter will smoke a lot less and be able to take a lot more heat because it doesn't have all the contamination from the milk solids. All right, so what we're doing here is we're just bringing the butter to a boil, and then what that's doing is actually getting rid of some of the moisture, which leads to spoilage, but it also allows the whey to come to the top, and we're just gonna be scraping this off. Now, you'll see some like white flaky stuff. That white flaky stuff is actually the other milk solids, which will sink to the bottom once we actually do the separation. So we're simply getting the foam off. That's the whey, and that's very light. The milk solids, once we separate them out, will sink to the bottom, and then we'll do basically 2 separations to get the clarified butter in the center, right? So you got the light stuff, the heavy stuff, and in the center is what we want. So this is gonna take about 10 minutes or so. And we're just gonna scrape this stuff off till we end up with some really clean yellow with some chunks in it, because that's gonna be impossible to get that out this process. But then once we get all this foam off and no more foam forms, then we're gonna pour it in a bowl and let that milk solid settle out. All right, so you guys will notice that as you start to boil this and you're scraping off the whey, you'll notice that the bubbles will get smaller and smaller and smaller. That's because you're actually reducing how much moisture is actually in the pot here. So when you're getting less moisture, the bubbles are a lot smaller, and that means you're getting really close to just kind of finishing it off. You see here how the bubbles are really super small, they're not big plops. That's because most of the moisture has been evaporated through the boiling process, and so you're not really getting the big plops. You're getting more of a small fizzle as if you were frying something. This is what you want to look for. Now, you want to be careful not to do this too long, otherwise you're actually going to caramelize and burn some of those, the milk solids at the bottom. So I'm going just until I basically have all of the whey, or most of the whey, scraped off. And then from there, we're going to transfer it to a pan where it can actually kind of settle out. And that way we can scrape off, or kind of siphon off, if you will, the butter fat, the liquefied butter fat from the milk solids below. All right, so this is what it should look like after about 15 minutes. We've been scraping and boiling, and you'll notice the bubbles are they're just very small. And on the bottom, you start to feel the milk solids kind of catching. That's when you know it's done. It's really starting to kind of settle out. And you don't want those milk solids to burn, otherwise you're gonna end up with you kind of end up with a bit of a nutty flavor, but it kind of also can be kind of bitter if you overcook it or cook it at too high of a temperature. So low and slow, this is what you want to go for. This looks awesome. And now we're going to transfer this over to a dish, a clear bowl, so it can settle out. All right, so the other thing you'll notice is there's no steam. The lack of steam is why this is basically done, is because the boiling process is getting out water, and water creates steam. So when you don't see any more steam, that's another kind of hack to know that you're done. So don't overcook it, it's not necessary. All right, we're gonna put this into any type of container. I'm putting it into this Pyrex so you can see it settle out, because there's gonna be, right now this is mostly clarified butter, but at the bottom, if you wanna get all of it, you're gonna find that there is some milk solid still at the bottom. And that's what kind of is at the very, very bottom of the pan. So I'm gonna stop while we're ahead here, but you'll see here, all of these, see that, all that? Now, obviously I'm very much no waste. So I'm gonna get the clarified butter that I want. I'll reserve this. I'll settle the rest of this out later. But if you were to wait about 15 minutes, all of this would basically sink down to the bottom. And then you could use a spoon or a ladle and basically just ladle out the butter fat. That's what's on top right now. And anything else that's an impurity, like the milk fats, the milk solids, those are down at the bottom there. So that is clarified butter. That's what we're looking for to start the next step. All right, so what you guys are seeing are actually those little particles of milk solids floating down. It looks kind of like a buttery snow globe, but that is what you're looking for to settle out. So even though most of it was at the bottom of the pan, you're still gonna get some. And so by waiting 5-10 minutes, you're gonna get a lot of those milk solids to settle down at the bottom of your clarified butter. So we're just gonna let this sit and basically just kind of wait it out. All right, so next thing we're gonna do is we're actually gonna begin the infusing process. So what we've gone and done is washed out our pan, and we're basically just boiling it dry. You'll see all that steam there. We're boiling it dry because we do not want any moisture again. Also, just to reiterate, herbs are dry as well. They're gonna kind of crackle and pop because they have moisture within the leaf, but we don't want any excess moisture. So all we're gonna do is take our clarified butter here, and what you'll see is a lot of this has settled out. It's nice and clear now. So we're basically just going to, once this is dry, we're gonna take our ladle and we're gonna ladle in our clarified butter, keeping the milk solids at the bottom. And that way we only have clarified butter, because also, fun fact for you, Clarified butter will last way longer than actual butter will, and that's because you're only having the butter fat. It's basically the equivalent of olive oil or coconut oil or any other oil you're using, is because you're basically just separating just the fat. So there's no solids, there's no water, and so where butter might only last about a month or so, this can actually last in your fridge for up to a year. It's actually even shelf stable. You take butter and leave it out, it's gonna spoil within maybe 3 to 5 weeks. But if you keep it on in your pantry, clarified butter can last up to 6 months. All right, so all we're gonna do is just ladle in some of that beautiful clarified butter. And once we get all that clarified butter in the pan, we're gonna add our herbs. All right, check it out. That is the milk solids at the very bottom. They settle out pretty easily, so you don't have to worry about really, it's not a struggle to get them to settle out. Just gotta wait a little bit. So now all we have to do is take our herbs and we're gonna add herbs right into the clarified butter. Now they are gonna foam a lot, so make sure you go with like a low temp, low and slow. Really important. We're basically just frying, we're deep frying these herbs in the oil. You don't want to add them all at once, otherwise you have a chance of it spilling over and having a grease fire, which I don't want to be responsible for a grease fire in your house. So go low and slow. There's no rush with this. These are not going to, they're not going to burn because they're essentially in oil and you're at such a low temperature, you're basically just boiling off that excess moisture in the leaf. That's what's splattering and causing those bubbles. But the smell is insane. Insane. Now all we're gonna do is we're simply going to basically fry these leaves in this clarified butter for about 3 to 4 minutes. You don't want the leaves to actually start to turn brown or look like they're burning. That means it's way too hot. You're gonna start to see the leaves start to turn a little bit black. That's very normal, but you don't want them to actually start to turn like crispy and brown. A coloration change is very normal, but we're just taking those essential oils and we're essentially distilling the essential oils right into the oil. This is essentially, this is basically a carrier oil, if you will. When you're taking essential oils and you're adding them to, say, like a, I don't know, like a body lotion or something like that, that's what you're doing is you're taking an essential oil and you're adding it to a carrier oil. All you're doing with the clarified butter is using it as a carrier oil to basically carry the oil from the sage into the butter. All right, so now all we're going to do is simply take our clarified butter mixture and just dump it through a sieve. It's that simple. Now you'll notice all the leaves have kind of turned that kind of dark green, kind of semi-black color, and the smell is just outrageous. They're also just a tad bit crispy, which is kind of cool. Made some little sage chips. Ooh, delightfully unique. Kind of bitter. But basically all we're doing now is just letting this drip out, and then we're going to add it to we'll add it to a little container, throw it in the fridge. And we're going to do the same thing as we did with the sage clarified butter as the rosemary and garlic. All right, so we got our rosemary prepped. What we're gonna do is crush our garlic so that, in the words of Brad Leone, we'll get the Allison out. Allison. Low and slow. Alrighty, last batch is done. The rosemary and garlic. All right, now that this is cooled off, which is important, you do not want to add basically boiling hot 300-degree oil into a plastic container here, but we're going to add this beautiful clarified butter into our container. Just check that out. Absolutely incredible. Not an impurity, a fleck, nothing. Gorgeous.